Welcome out. Here we are. Moving on, we're finally getting into the double digits, chapter 10. Make decisions, solve problems. Bit of a review. We like to do this occasionally. In the beginning, I was reviewing every chapter, but that gets a little redundant, a little excessive. But at this point, it's good since we're about halfway with, there's 20 chapters in here. And again, we're not going to do them all, but we'll do most of them. The first chapter, fair-minded thinking, that's what you want. You don't want unfair-minded thinking. You don't want selfish thinking. You don't want defeatist thinking. You don't want immoral, unethical thinking. You want fair, and you want to use all the standards of critical thinking in that fairness of thinking. Okay. Then we took a look at where are we. Therefore, we look at the four stages of development, right? And there's actually six. I don't know when the other two are coming in, but they're in one of the later chapters. Anyways, uh, there's four here just to get you started. The first level is probably where most people are. Most people begin and end up in life, sadly. It's just being totally unaware. Then two is awareness. Three, you're starting to build your tools and abilities. Four, you're advancing upon that build and so forth, right? Then once you've got an understanding of what type of thinking you want to do, fair-minded, what level you're at, say I'm at a two, then you want to understand outside of yourself, what's going on outside in the complex world, right? That's what that is. Then we go back in, we start breaking things down. We want to look at critical thinking in a little more detail. So, what are the parts of thinking? What are the standards of thinking, right? And then we start looking at the questioning. Questions are important. Questions are critical. Questions, number one, the most important thing you can do is question proper questions, applicable, relevant questions in solving any problem, from the least important to mid to greatly important, all right? Upper tier stuff as well. And that's where most of this really comes in most significantly is the upper tier questions, problems, issues, right? Master the thinking, master the content. So again, we're working on thinking this developmental section, the middle section. The first two are kind of like introductory. What is it we want? Where am I? Okay, let's understand what critical thinking is, right? And then you start doing it here. All right. Master the thinking, master the content. Then we want to you're always looking at models, discover how the best thinkers learn, right? And I've been reading uh, from the best thinkers for probably at least last couple of decades, right? And I'll tell you, it helps tremendously. It breaks down a lot of the confusion out there. It helps you really kind of zero in on problem solving relatively quickly. You get to see a bigger, fuller, more comprehensive picture. You're not as fooled as often. You're not as wrong as often as most people are, or just wandering, right? A lot of people just wander, kind of throw darts, as they say, to problem solve. Is this a possible solution? How about that? And so a lot of times people don't even hit the dartboard or they're, terrible shots at it. Then since this book is geared towards the student, it gets into redefined grades as levels of thinking and learning. Now we're getting into the kind of the back end stuff, right? This is kind of the first nine chapters are kind of the startup, and this is kind of the back end stuff, right? Now you're taking all that knowledge about thinking, understanding about thinking, attempted mastering, or an understanding of what mastering thinking is, critical thinking that is, right? And now you're starting to apply it. So now you're starting to make decisions and solve problems. So let's begin there, okay? And I think I'm probably going to do the first 10 pages. We'll see how it goes. Because sometimes I get off on purposeful, useful tangents. People say get off on a tangent, but some tangents are necessary, relevant, and important. Anyways, everyday life is an endless sequence of decision making and problem solving. There you go. So I rest my case. Is critical thinking important? Is it systemic? Is it all consuming? Yes. It is. And I can tell you from personal experience, I can tell you from all the teaching I've been doing and all the reading I've been doing and all the looking at other thinkers out there, great thinkers out there in the various fields and disciplines. And that is true. The quality of the decisions we make coupled with our competence in solving problems largely determine the quality of our life. You notice I've got that a little more. I think that's supposed to be orange. Orange and green gives us whatever that is. So that's a key point. A couple of really key points right there, right? So the decision making, problem solving is endless. It's almost a uh, daily issues, and some are relatively minor. Like, what should I have for breakfast? Do I have time to fill up the car with gas? What route should I take to work? Who do I need to call first today? Right. But then, you move up from there. So it's the quality of the decisions, right? Coupled with our competence. I'd highlight those key words, right? It's the quality of decisions, right? Along with competence, our competence in solving problems, greatly, what's largely? 80%, 90% of the time, determine the quality of our lives. And there it is, right? I can tell you that that's true. Since I've been heading down this road over the last 20, 25 years or so at least, things have improved markedly, tremendously, considerably. Most people work through decisions and problems in an intuitive way, just kind of gut instinct, and intuition's not bad. What did Einstein say about tuition? Without intuition, there is nothing, right? But of course, he was also great at researching and using critical thinking and logical thinking. He was talking about ultimate decision making because ultimately, at some time, you got to make a decision. As Einstein said, and many before him who came before him and after have said, you only have so much time, you only have so much understanding, you can only do so much research. There seems to be an almost infinite or endless amount of data or information out there, or options sometimes, not an infinite amount of options, but many options, right? So at some point you got to make a decision. Well, I don't have enough data. I don't have enough research. I don't have enough uh, experience time wise, right? Well, I got to make a decision within the next couple of weeks or at least within the next month. So I got to kind of go by gut instinct. And that is very useful. And that is also a tool that you can develop. I can tell you from personal experience. And I think, who was it? Steve Jobs, who put the ding in the universe with his Apple computers and the Apple way. Um, he was another one. He says, he said, well, he died at what, 55, 56. And he said, before he died, obviously, we're already dead. So what are you waiting for? Right? Um, Meaning we don't have much time. And he had less time than most of us. Right? So you got to get going. You got to make decisions. You can't wait. You can't wait forever. You can't wait for the perfect moment. You can't wait for the definitive or absolutely sure and conclusive answer. So intuition is important, right? But if all you rely on is gut feeling, I feel that, today I should do this or do that, whatever, make this purchase, right? You've got to have some critical thinking and logic and research and some type of rationale, right, going on. They go with their first reactions and conclusions. Yeah. And that's okay once you've done your homework, right? That's intuition once you've done your homework, but you got to do a lot of work first. They have no systematic way by which to deal with decisions and problems. Sometimes this haphazard approach works. I would say very seldom. Sometimes maybe that's giving too much credit where credit is not due. I would say very rarely does that approach work. Uh, when we bring critical thinking tools into our decision making and problem solving process, we are more likely to solve the problems we face and make rational decisions. There it is, right? In this chapter, we provide an integrated approach to working through decisions and problems. First, we address decision making, then problem solving. As we work our way through the chapter, note the overlap between the two processes, right? So that's an important part, right? We provide integrated approach to working through decisions and problem. So that's that double pronged or two pronged approach, right? Or the two processes. Two solution. Keep them in mind, right? And the book will remind you or remind us as we go. To live is to act is to decide. That sounds like a Shakespearean statement. Every day you are faced with a myriad. What does that mean? You don't know. You know, you can. I don't know if it works on it. Can I do this? Yeah. Well, I can look it up on Wikipedia. Well, this is the book. But you can usually what you can do is highlight it, right click it, and then search for the definition. Myriad just means a lot, a whole bunch, many, many, right? With the myriad decisions, some of the decisions are small and inconsequential. Some are large, life determining. When our pattern of decision making is rational, we live a rational life. And then vice versa. If it's not rational, it's irrational life, right? Rational decisions maximize the quality of life without violating the rights or harming the well-being of others. And that's true. And that's people who are generally overly emotional, kind of unhinged, not steeped in the rational, disciplined, comprehensive, deliberate type of thinking, rational, critical thinking, are usually very emotional. They make rash decisions, a lot of yelling, a lot of squirming, a lot of blaming, right? And that causes not only problems for them, but for others. And I'm sure you've been around people like that. It's highly destructive, not only for the individual, but for individuals who come in contact with that destructive nature, right? Believe me, I just dealt with somebody like that. Very disruptive. And sometimes it will take days to kind of get your psyche or your mentality back on track, right? Even if you're not the individuals dispensing that irrational emotion, highly emotional, reactionary mindset, you know, you could be on the outside of that and still, I mean, it's like taking a couple shots to the solar plexus of life, of existence. And then, oh man, I got to readjust, right? When applied to decision making, critical thinking enhances the rationality of our decisions by raising the pattern of decision making to the level of conscious and deliberate choice. Good. I like that. No one deliberately, let's do, okay, so this is italicized. I will highlight it. There's another one over here. Subconsciously, I will highlight that. Always when you're reading, and reading, fundamental, sure, but reading is very important. Knowing how to read. What are you looking at? Understanding where the answers are, understanding what uh, paragraphs do, what sentences do, what transitions do, what punctuation does, uh, diction or word choice, syntax or arrangement of words. Not only in interpreting or decoding what you're reading, but also encoding when you're trying to communicate. And a part of communicating is encoding proper language, right? Proper word choice, diction, sentence structure, paragraph development, coherence, transitions, unity, right? Simplicity, right? All that is important. No one deliberately chooses to live an irrational life. Many, however, subconsciously choose, not unconsciously. Unconsciously is it's down there and you're not aware of it. You probably need a psychologist or psychiatrist to pull it out. You know, okay, you know, let's go back to when you were 5 years old. You know, they put you into a trance, they hypnotize you, right? They put you under their spell, and then you have to from there. go to your unconscious and kind of pull out stuff. And sometimes that, without a proper guide, that can be extremely traumatizing. So you need somebody there who can help you get the stuff, maintain your sanity while you're acquiring it, and the after effects. It's kind of a harrowing, difficult, dangerous thing to do, right? Uh, to be hypnotized. There's another word for it, but you know what I'm talking about. Subconsciously choose. I'm not a psychologist, so subconsciously choose to live an irrational or an unethical life. In doing so, they maximize their chances for unhappiness. That's it. Or they do harm to others, as I was talking about, right? And seeking their own advantage. Or in acting irrationally, emotional, over the top, panicking, screaming, right? How can we determine the extent to which our decision making is irrational? In the first place, our irrational decisions often are those we make without realizing we are making them, right? If you ask yourself how many decisions you made yesterday, you probably will be puzzled as to how to determine the number. In a sense, the absolute number is unimportant. I can't tell you how many decisions I made yesterday. I'd have to sit and think about it for a while. I'd probably miss a few. What is important is to recognize the categories of decisions you made and find a way to begin to identify and evaluate patterns within those categories. We all have basic human needs. We all make choices as to how to satisfy those needs. True. Further, we all have chosen values and make choices in relation to those values. We all assume that our basic values support our welfare and contribute to our well-being. No one says, even to himself or herself, I choose to live in accordance with the values that undermine my welfare and harm me. When we make decisions that undermine or harm others' well-being or harm others' well-being, that's the problem with possessive. They seem a little awkward, right? Decisions that undermine or harm others, the well-being of others, I would say. That's why I wouldn't do that. Sorry, I'm giving you a little writing lesson as well. We make decisions that undermine or harm the well-being of others. See? Instead of saying or harm others' well-being. You kind of have to stop. And then others. And if you're not reading it, you don't have the words there. Others. You might miss the possessive, right? So I would not write it like that. Just FYI. Little writing tip. We make unethical decisions when we make decisions or choose values that undermine or harm our well-being. We make irrational decisions. Here's some common patterns of irrational, unethical decisions. What are they? Deciding to behave in ways that undermine our welfare. Deciding not to engage in activities that contribute to our long-term welfare. Deciding to behave in ways that undermine another's welfare. There you go. Right. So it's not just you harm. It's not just your own or our welfare, but it's others, right? Deciding to associate with people who encourage us to act against our own welfare or the welfare of others, right? So these may sound odd, but there is a general answer to this query as to why would anyone make self-defeating or self-harming decisions? Good question, but it's very common, right? These decisions are made for immediate gratification, short-term gain. We make them because we're lazy, we're ignorant, we're inept, we don't have any discipline, we don't have any methodologies, we don't think things through, we're not rational, we're not deliberate, right? And once you start using critical thinking and a rational mind, it's amazing how much foreknowledge, not like you're seeing into the future, but it's almost like you're emotionally and mentally prepared beforehand, before any problems come up, or before you have to make any decisions, even short-term decisions, right? Or even if you're watching a video or reading something, right? Because you have this precautionary, rational, critical thinking methodology in place, you're always a little skeptical. Hold on, let's not jump into a hook, line, and sinker, such as being online. Oftentimes, articles, and it's getting worse as the years go on. Articles will be written, statements will be made by inexperienced or uneducated or uh, trolls, posters, commenters, right? And there's a lot of misinformation, wrong information, outright lies, manipulation, brainwashing, gaslighting going on out there. So you got to be very careful. And do people fall for that stuff? All too frequently, right? And you see like for instance, AI. You see the AI for warners. They're always warning. That's AI. Be careful, AI. By now, if it's not obvious to you what AI is, in regards to videos at least, and pictures maybe, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board. Go back to elementary school. Learn shapes and patterns and try to get your brain up to speed, right? But anyways, continuing. This becomes more apparent when we look at more specific categories within these categories. For example, under deciding to behave in ways that undermine one's welfare, or deciding to eat foods that are unhealthy. True. Decide to smoke, drink, excess, or use drugs. I was just online looking at some notes, some things from my doctor, right? How to control hypertension, how to control obesity, how to control any, I don't want to say any, but many potential problems down the road really comes down to what you put down your throat, right? So you want to cut back on the snacks, you want to cut back or eliminate alcohol, smoking, cigarettes, drugs, sodium, fast foods, snacks, all that stuff, right? What they said here, deciding not to exercise. Another thing is to, increase your exercise, not decrease it. Taking into account the long term requires reflection. There it is. And for a long time, for many, many a year, I spent hours and hours and days reflecting on things. Very important, very critical tool, or part of one of the tools in the toolkit of critical thinking. We must raise our behavior to the level, as Piaget put it, of conscious, I like that. I like that. Conscious realization. Got it? When we identify a pattern of irrational decision making in our life, we have discovered what sometimes is called a bad habit, in other terms, right? Irrational patterns of irrational decision making. What? Bad habit. When we replace a pattern of irrational decision making with a rational pattern, we replace a bad habit with a good habit. The replacement is at the level of action. Big decisions. There are two kinds of big decisions to learn to watch out for. Those that we have more or less, those that have more or less obvious long-term consequences, those whose long-term consequences must be discovered. So there's the obvious, let's do this, long-term consequences. Let's do two colors, right? And long-term consequences that must be discovered, right? There you go. And that's generally how you should read, right? You're always looking as a critical thinker, as a critical reader, and that's something else that I teach. You're always looking for key phrases and terms. That's like little snapshots or pictures that you can put into your mind's eye. Because here's something for you to know how the mind works or doesn't work. It works a lot more poorly than well, right? If you read, say you go home and you have to read 30, 40 pages, let's say 30 pages, a chapter for tomorrow's class, right? You read it, you don't take any notes, you just read it and put it aside. Within 24 hours, by the time you get to class, probably the next day, you've already forgotten 80% of it. If you take some notes, if you annotate, if you stop, reflect, and go back and work the material through a couple times, 2 or 3 times, and take some time with it, your memory of the material will increase a good amount, right? But still, you'll probably forget at least half of it. That's how our brain works or doesn't work, right? What is most dangerous? And there are mnemonic devices that you can use. There are things that you can do to kind of trick the brain into remembering things. And I've got a lot of suggestions, but maybe that's for another time. What is most dangerous in general are unthought decisions, the decisions that creep into our lives unnoticed and unevaluated. Clearly, it is not possible to raise all decisions to the level of conscious realization, for then we would have no habits whatsoever. How about that one? That's a good point. It is not possible to raise all decisions to the level of conscious realization, right? True. So, what do they say? You have to choose your battles. Einstein said, and kind of related to this, if it's something knowledge that you use on a regular basis, put it in here, get it in there somehow, right? If you don't need that knowledge on a regular basis, just periodically leave it in the book or in the text or wherever, right? Look it up later. Rather, we aim to evaluate categories. There we go. Try again. Categories or clusters of decisions, big in their collectivity. Well, that's a nice word. And the individual big decisions, right? What I use? What's the useful thing? The logic of decision making. It is useful to consider the logic of decision making. That logic is determined by the goal of decision making and the question that follows from that goal. Okay. The goal to decide between some set of alternatives, choosing the one most in keeping with our welfare or welfare of others. That's good. I like that. Question put in terms of completing the following sentence. At this point in my life, faced with the alternative, A, B, C, D, or however, whatever, which one is most likely to enhance my welfare and the welfare of others? Bingo. Okay, so example. When I decided to go back to school, I realized that I wanted to probably write. The key thing that I've done since I was maybe 15, 16 was write, language. Loved reading, used to grab a book and go up into a tree and read a book. Sorry, total nerdsville, right? So I really loved words, reading. But I thought, well, if I'm going to read, then I'll probably want to write because after you've been reading a while, you want to participate in the game, you want to play, so you want to be able to write, do some writing so others can read. And that's where I began. Um, my goal at that point, and goals change, okay? So my goal at that point was just to get my degree in my undergrad and graduate degrees in writing, composition or creative writing. And that's about as far as my plan went at the time. Then I got out of college, or I was close to getting out of college, and I realized, well, if I'm going to be a teacher, so these things evolve, right? All of your, especially complex endeavors such as career, this doesn't just all come at once. They kind of it happens as you're moving forward. Like many a writer says, I don't know what I'm thinking until I write. So the ideas aren't there. You have to discover them, uncover them, bring them out, put them down, and then maybe rework them a time or two or three or 10 or 20 or 30. I don't know, whatever, right? So initially, so just get my degree. And then for some reason, I had a very strong inkling to start reading. You know, I said, if I'm going to be a teacher, if I'm going to be an advisor at the collegiate level, then it's probably imperative that I know some general things about major disciplines, right? So that's when I sat down and I started reading five, six, seven books a summer on the major disciplines, history, ethics, economics, science, math, theology, philosophy, right? I just started, I think that was about it. Maybe there was another category or two in there. But I started to read textbooks, five, six, seven textbooks in those areas, and it was very enlightening. Then you start to see the bigger picture as to what knowledge is, why humans study what they human, why humans study what they study, and maybe be able to give some advice to students. And I didn't realize what my next step would be after that. But then once I did that, I said, well, this is almost like coaching. Why don't I do that? Career life coaching. And then I started to move into that. And I started to write books because that's what I do, right? I learned how to write. So I wrote a book well, I wrote a science fiction book, but that was before all that started, really. That was probably in my undergrad years. And then I wrote a book on career success, coaching kind of stuff, right? And then I wrote a book on achievement. I wrote a book on what are some of the most important categories. What do most people, if I'm going to coach, what do most students or most people need most of the time in most situations? Well, they need to know money, right? So economic finance. So I made that a part of my program. I was glad that I read those books. How about achievement, success? Oh yeah, that was another category, right? So achievement or success, and I had read a bunch of books in that category, right? How about mathematics and science? Because math and science drive our economy, right? And it's a good thing that I read those two categories. So all the stuff that I had read was actually preparing me to go to the next step, which was coaching. So you see how it works? And it's kind of a piecemeal thing, right? You kind of have to figure it out as you go, right? The four keys to sound decision making are what? I lost my mouse. There it is. Recognize that you face an important decision, accurately identify the alternatives, logically evaluate the alternatives, have the self-discipline to act on the best alternative. Bingo. Much of the worst decision making is the result of the failure to recognize that its decision is at hand, right? So it's important to recognize, isn't that the first stage, right? Being aware, recognize the need for an important decision. The result then is that many decisions are made subconsciously and therefore often egocentrically or sociocentrically, right? It's either made in here, if it's not made by the ego, it's made by the egos of others, right? And interestingly enough, most of the egos of the others are tied into groupthink. So if you're in a particular political group or a particular social group or a particular religious group or particular socioeconomic group or a particular workforce group, right? You're part of the carpenters guild or you're part of the business person guild or family, right? You start to think along the lines of groupthink, right? And those decisions are often. There's one guy that was in marketing. I read about marketing. There's another one. He said that most people who make decisions in business are wrong. And I thought, really, that's kind of sad. And he said, well, if you look at startup businesses, 90% of businesses who start up new businesses have failed in the first 3 to 5 years. Why is that? Well, you're learning, right? And what happens if you learn and make mistakes in business? Well, you lose it, right? If you make mistakes in school, you get a lower grade, you can retry it. But in business, you lose whatever money you had or investment or work you had, and you got to start over, right? Just how the cookie crumbles. Um, anyways, where was it? Many choices that people make about friends, associates, schoolwork, family, choice of amusement, including alcohol and drug, and the satisfaction of personal needs are a result of mindless decisions. It never occurred to me. I just realized these are often the after the fact explanations when the negative implications of the decisions are realized. Here's I forget the exact title of the text. So there's a guy, I don't think he's still around, but marketing, and if you're into marketing and sales, Og Man Dino, strange name, right? Oops, I put Mandino. That's not it. No, not Mandu. Just a sec. There it is. Og Mandino. And he wrote a book. The greatest success in the world is one. That's not the one I'm looking for. He also wrote The Greatest Salesman. The greatest secret in the world. I guess that's his catchphrase. The greatest, right? The greatest salesman, greatest secret, and so forth. Um, so the greatest secret. One aspect of the greatest secret is what not to do, or what most people do. And there's another book, and there's another high achievement success person who wrote about this too. Is that one of a great secret? I don't want to say the greatest secret, but one of the secrets to success is realizing that most people just follow. They're like dodo birds. Dodo birds are extinct, so don't follow their route. They just follow. What do my parents do? They're accountants. I'm going to become an accountant. What are the popular jobs? STEM, science, technology, engineering, STEM jobs. Green jobs are popular. I'm going to go in that way. What are the highest paying jobs? I'm going to do that. What are my friends doing? I'm going to do that. What are my parents or friends or what are the influencers doing? Right. So, are any of those jobs or endeavors or avenues or routes your route? Maybe partially, but you got to find your own. So the greatest secret, and what he talks about is how to discover that, right? So that's a good book thing to check out. It never occurred to me. I just didn't realize these are often the after the fact explanations when the negative implications of the decisions are realized. This is good stuff. This is not only critical thinking. This is like psychology, right? Excuse me. Excuse me. Recognizing that a decision is at hand is not all there is to it. We also must recognize what our alternatives are. Here, many decisions go awry. That's a nice word. They go wrong because of failure to accurately identify the alternative. Comes in two forms: thinking that something is an alternative when it's not, failure to recognize an alternative. That almost seems logical, right? The logical follow up, right? So thinking unrealistically, people do that way too often. or inaccurately, or they do groupthink, or they just kind of. It's interesting that I read one time that people oftentimes will hear something uh, several times, and just because it's been repeated, they believe it's true, right? This is why advertisers and psychologists, psychiatrists talk about this. That's why advertisers just keep repeating stuff, right? Or a hit song, they just keep playing it. Remember, a song, you hear a song on the radio, that's all right, but you keep hearing it and you go, it's kind of catchy. Now it's stuck in my head. And now you go out and buy the song and you're playing it, right? So that mere repetition. So don't get caught up by repetition or convinced by repetition. I should say, right? Um, for instance, there was an example where someone happened to hear a teacher or maybe administrator say something, and then later on they heard a politician. It's kind of like you become aware before you didn't know anything about what the topic is that you're hearing about, right? It's like when you buy a new car. I buy a Toyota Camry, and all of a sudden, oh, everybody has a Camry. No, those Camrys were all out there before, but you didn't have anything to reference. You had no point of reference. And it's just another car. But when you own it, you go, oh, geez, everybody has a Camry. Well, that's true. Probably one of the most popular cars out there. But yeah, it's where you become aware because all of a sudden you start focusing on it. So, anyways, you hear something teachers or administrators say, then maybe your parents or friends say, then you hear it on the radio, then you see it online, you go, oh, that's interesting. I heard it a bunch of times, and you're not even thinking consciously. You're not thinking this consciously, but subconsciously. And then you take it in. This is how we are often fooling ourselves. We're delusional. You take it in and you start thinking and believing that whatever you've heard multiple times is the truth, the God honest truth. So it's true, right? But you haven't researched it, and a lot of times it's not true. It could be true, right? It could be fact based, but a lot of times it's not. Among the common decisions in the first category of failure are decisions such as these. I know he's got major faults, but he loves me and I can help him change. And we've all heard that, right? I know there's lots of problems in our relationships. We love each other. That's all that matters. Good Lord. I've been there. I stopped that thinking a long time ago. I know I'm not doing well in school, but I'll make it in the NBA. There you go. Um, I'm going to be an NBA star. I'm going to be a rock star. I'm going to be a singer, right? And then people will say, well, I don't have something to fall back on because people say those are people that don't ever make it. They don't have something to fall back on. Well, to make it in the NBA, there's not a lot of NBA jobs, and there's tons of players out there who are great players but aren't playing because there's just not enough job openings. That's it, right? And if your skills are not a top shelf skill, your chances of getting in are almost zero. Even if they are top shelf skills, you still got to be able to work your way into the league. Anyways, I know I need to learn this, but I can learn it by cramming the night before. Yeah, don't do that. Second category of failure, thinking too narrowly, is difficult to correct because no one believes he or she is thinking too narrowly. And there's a part of the self-deception again. We are always deceiving ourselves, at least in the beginning. Once you start to realize that deception is innate, it's natural, it's a part of the human condition, right? We bring it with us when we come to this planet, that you've got to overcome it. Most of the stuff that gets in your way has to be overcome. Laziness or indifference or inertia. I don't want to go to the gym. I'm tired. I don't want to read that chapter tonight. It's boring. I don't want to be to work on time or to leave on time. I'm going to leave early, come in late. I'm tired of being on time or whatever, right? I don't want to not eat that cake. It's too yummy. I'm going to eat cake. I'm going to eat all the fast food. So the stuff that's easy to do, it's usually the stuff that's hard to do that you have to sacrifice and have to have some discipline. That's the stuff that greatness is usually made of, right? Actually, the more narrow the thinkers, the more confident the thinkers are that they are broad-minded, right? Right? Don't they say that it's usually the ignorance is bliss? Well, that's part of it. They don't know that they don't know, so they think they know, right? They're delusional. They believe they know. Good general rule is that if you can think of only one or two options, you probably are thinking too narrowly. We have found the following twofold rules to be useful. Rule one, there's always a way. Rule two, there's always another way. I think that should cover it, right? So, and always a way doesn't mean the way that aligns with your initial goals and dreams and aspirations. There have been many a people, many a time, probably the majority, who have had certain goals and aspirations, but for whatever reason could not follow that path. Um, but they eventually found a path or a pathway or pathways that were been able to satisfy them in some way, in some measure, and in considerable ways, in significant ways, right? So keep that in mind. And it happened. It happened to me. It happens to a lot of people. If you learn this and learn how to do it right, do things right, right? Putting more time into decision making. If we don't make time for reflective thought, there it is about our decisions, we cannot improve. So reflection, and in my early years when I was younger, man, I spent tons of time reflecting, and you need to because you're starting from scratch, right? You got a lot of work. You got a lot to work through. It's kind of, if you're just graduating from high school and you don't know what you want to do and do with your life, career wise, relationship wise, money wise, and so forth, whatever, right? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of thinking before you start acting and making decisions, right? A real change of behavior requires some thought about our present behavior. The key here is to recognize that we lose a tremendous amount of time through bad decision making. There it is, right? Students often lose a great deal of time by their chosen and inefficient mode of studying. Oh, yeah. Most students study poorly. Statistically speaking, the data bears it out that there's probably about 10–15% of all students at any given time in college who are at the top tier. Those are the desirable. Those are the students that the employer, sorry, want to hire. If I have 70, 80, 90, $100,000 in a salary that I want to give to somebody, why would I give it to anybody inferior at the mid-level or low level unless I'm getting a supplement from the government? But then again, even if I get that supplement from the government and it helps to pay for the salary, I'm still getting an inferior quality employee. And my business is going to suffer accordingly. So maybe I don't want to do that, right? Putting more time into our decisions and making better decisions as a result is going to save us a tremendous amount of time that otherwise would result from the need to correct the bad decisions. People need to think through their major habits. They need to give time to the decisions they make around major needs and block the time. Eating habits, exercise, free time, social interactions, and so forth. Yes, the cell phone. Cell phone. That, really bad habits. Most people, a lot of people, the average amount of time spent on a cell phone is 4 to 6 hours a day. What are most people doing? Email, texting, playing games, social media. What is that? That's mostly distraction. That's mostly the candy store of life. It's not essential. It's not primary. Most of that, right? Maybe you're texting to the babysitter. I'm going to be late today. Come later. Or to the wife. Well, I'm going to work a little extra. Or to the boss. Here's the reports. But most of that is, and even the newest technology. When what was the first telephone that came? A kind of an app. It was the Black. Remember the BlackBerry? I guess there were apps on there. There was texting and email. So it was the first kind of computer phone, right? And of course, the iPhone came next, and that was much more developed than the Android, what I have here. And it's almost like a little computer on your phone, right? And there's all kinds of apps on here. I've got photos and lifestyle and community, and I've got video. I've got social. I've got sports. I got a game on here. There's several social media, weather app, Pinterest. I don't know why that's on there. My credit reports, which is important. My fidelity, my investments, which is important. My library, my KP Health, which is my health guide. That's important. So there is some stuff on here. I have my OneNotes where I keep all my notes and information and things. And so my Planet Fitness, right, app on there, and my T-Mobile, my tools and things, right. So it does have its important aspects to it, but most of the time, most of the people spending most of their time on insignificant, insignificant stuff. Right? Be careful. Careful how you spend your time. Dealing with one major decision at a time, speed thinking usually does not help us think well through our decisions. The more complex, the more important it is, the more merits, the greater the merits of a decision, the more deliberate you need to be. Take your time. The more things we try to do simultaneously and the faster we try to do them, the more likely we will be able to do each of those things poorly. I love that. I love that. Developing knowledge of your ignorance. We are ignorant about most of our decision making. We're all equal in our infinite ignorance. What we don't know is way beyond what we ever could know. Even the most intelligent, brilliant person with a photographic memory is still not going to know a fraction of all that is known or will be known. Knowledge is not stationary. Knowledge is always developing, right? The more knowledge we gain of our ignorance, the more thoughtful our decisions will become. Bingo. There you go. So it's becoming knowledgeable. It's becoming reflective. It's becoming self-aware. It's realizing how the brain works. It's really realizing how we deceive ourselves. It's really realizing how we often think in knee-jerk reaction ways, that we're not deliberate, that we're not rational, that we're not critical thinkers, that we're not good thinkers, that we're delusional, that our brains also are not good thinking devices. We don't take in information well. We don't retain it well. We don't process it well. We don't recall it well. So be aware, be aware, be aware. We need not to know what we need to, excuse me, let's try that. We tend not to know what we need to know to make effective decisions, but the primary problem most of us face is that we think we already know everything relevant to making those decisions. We're intellectually ignorant. Oh, that's huge. I wish I had some other way of, is there anything else I got on there? Made a flashcard. Yeah. Well, I could have a note. Let's do this. Do it. Didn't realize that was in there. All right, a couple more pages. Dimensions of decision making using the elements of thought as our guide. We can identify at least 9 dimensions of decision making that represent potential problems. They presuppose, come before, presuppose is come before, right? They come before good judgments and sound thinking in every, there it is again. Whenever you see absolutes, if smart people are using absolutes, they mean it because absolutes are rare. Every time, all the time, never, right? because we rarely know things in the absolute, right? Figure out and regularly rearticulate your most fundamental goals. Yes, yes. I told you, it's a developing thing. So as I was moving along, I used to go for walks. I used to go for walks and take my phone, and I'd be out there for an hour or so, and just thinking and speaking, and then going for those walks like 4 or 5 times a week as I was developing my ideas, my career, and so forth and so on. And I did that for months and months and years, right? Regularly re-articulate. Whenever possible, take problems and decisions one by one. That's right. Study the circumstances surrounding the alternative possible decisions to make clear the kind of decisions you are dealing with. Figure out the information you need, right? Seek it. Carefully analyze, interpret the information, drawing what reasonable inferences you can. Again, not your inferences are going to be incomplete. Most of them, especially in the early stages, are going to be temporary and transient, right? Figure out your options for action. Evaluate your option. Adapt. So this is kind of the critical thinking process. I got a problem. I got an issue. I want to do something. What do I do? Well, I got to sit down and reflect and think. I need some knowledge. What do I know? What else do I need to know? So I got to look that up. Then I synthesize that stuff. Do I have enough knowledge? How often do I have to do this? Right. And then at some point, I got to start analyzing. I got my knowledge. Now let me analyze the situation. I think I've got enough of a startup here with my knowledge base. Now, with my knowledge base of understanding, let me analyze the situation, right? And this is a sloppy, ongoing process. It's not simple or just done in one way or one step or the same way each time you're making decisions, right? It's kind of sloppy, organic. So I research, synthesize, analyze, and then make a judgment. Now, what do I do, right? And that's generally how it's done. It's not perfect, but the thing is, you want experience. If you use critical thinking or that process time after time after time, it becomes much more innate. It becomes much more natural, and you're almost doing it sometimes before it even happens, right? It seems to be you're subconsciously prepared or preparing even before you come upon a decision that you have to make, right? Adapt strategic approach. When you act, monitor, right? So monitor, reflect, big part of the whole deal. Process, monitor the implications of your action as they begin to emerge. 2 to 11 years of age. So now we're looking at, we're going back in time. So what's interesting is, now we're looking at us, the human being. This is also a part of the decision-making process. When I sat down to write about education or think about education as a whole, I said, what is education? Well, let's go back to the beginning. And I went back to the beginning, at least in the United States, this country. Where did it begin? With moms in the kitchen, teaching their kids letters so that they could read scriptures, right? That was basically very religious people at that time. Not so much anymore. But so moms were teaching letters and reading and writing, right? And then as society developed, got a little more sophisticated. School was usually like those one-room schoolhouses were developed, right? And you had desks and you had books and you had lessons, right? And they were probably learning other things, but probably some simple rudimentary math, some pattern recognition, spelling, reading, writing, arithmetic, probably some rudimentary science, who knows, whatever it was, right? And then that course became more and more complicated over time. So if you're going to learn about something, if you're going to learn about critical thinking, then you're probably going to want to learn about this instrument that you're using for critical thinking. So let's take a look at the history of that instrument, the early decisions. By reviewing some of the major decision making that has shaped our lives, I'm not fooled. We can gain insight into the problems inherent in the process, right? One of the problems with children's decisions is that they're often the result of the party line, peer groups. So important, right? Because especially when you're, oh, what age is it? I remember reading the psychology of this. Usually like junior high. Doesn't that ring a bell? When you're younger, really small, you're just playing and screaming and having a good time, right? But socializing and social positioning becomes much more important, usually around junior high, early preteens, teens, right? Isn't that you've seen the movies, right? The kids are all in groups and cliques. Who's the popular girl guy, right? I want to be in that group. So, and what is popular to them? What makes them popular? What do they base their popularity in? Media, social networking, gaming, movies, right? So, what does Judy like to watch, listen to? What social media is on? She's an influencer. What does she influence? What does she dance? I'm going to dance because I want to be like the popular girl on TikTok or whatever. So technologies and ideologies thrust upon children are powerful influences. Furthermore, and sometimes powerful, not in a positive way. Sometimes, I want to say often, but sometimes in a destructive way. Human insecurity drives children to seek the recognition and acceptance from other children. So that's the thing about those early, pre-adolescent or early teen years. Very, very insecure, right? I want the security. Give me the security blanket of that peer group, especially the popular peer group. Let's go there. Many of the decisions and behaviors reflect an attempt to be liked by and included in their peer group. And believe me, the older you get, the less significant that becomes. You hear about Opie, I don't care. I don't give a damn what you think. Blah, 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 blah. So you've definitely, hopefully you've grown beyond that. Hopefully you're still not stuck in that peer group mentality, right? Imagine some like 60, 70-year-old person. I gotta go to TikTok and see what my main influencers are doing. Good stuff. That'd be a good comedy routine. Anyways, one way or another, the decisions made by or for us have an important impact on our personal personality and character. Decision influences our beliefs and attitudes, our sense of ourselves, our sense of the world in which we live, right? Let's go to the next age group category, 12 to 17. The adolescent years are important decision making in our lives. As adolescents, we tend to seek more independence in decision making. There you go. Though sometimes without being willing to make more, to take more responsibility for those decisions. True, true. So it's all a growth process, right? It's kind of a weaning away from, the self or the group or, whatever it may be. As you're growing, you're always, there's a push pull, right? You want to grow, but then, oh no, it's painful. Let me go back. You want to grow, you're going this way, 2 step forward, 1 step back, 2 step, right? That's kind of the growth process. Indeed, some adolescence seems to take the view I have the right to make my own decisions, but you have the responsibility to clean up my mess to help me escape the consequences, right? Good focus here. Love, sexuality, comprehensive view of the world become important to adolescents. There you go. So it's a more looking out, branching out beyond the self, beyond the clique and the peer group, and the small-mindedness and the smallness of the local peer group. So now you're going out beyond that to the larger, uh, greater existence, I should say. Although each of these is often understood superficially. The basis for their conceptions of these factors is often drawn from movies, music, television programs, right? And keep in mind that Hollywood has a particular agenda and their perspective on things is just a perspective, often biased and conditioned by the group, right? Maybe by the elites, maybe politically, maybe, I was going to say religiously or sectarianly, not religiously, right? And if you look at Hollywood, that's not a lot of it is religious related, It's a kind of a polar opposite to that. Right? Not conservative, that's for sure. This is a formula tailor-made for poor decision-making, bad habits, and media-created romantic relationships. Love is typically automatic. There you go. See? Irrational. At first, I have no real relationship to the character or the person. And I see that. I see that where, there was one where some guy met this girl. Geez, I don't know what the heck I was watching, but he met this girl and based on something, she had something. Oh, she was writing in her book or drawing. I was drawing something. And he just happened to look and see it and go, oh, what are you drawing? What are you doing? And then the next moment they're in bed, right? And then the guy looks at whatever it was that he had. He goes, this is good. I'll have to show my girlfriend. Right. Oh, so she kind of looks at him like, what? It's like the guy that goes out with a girl, or vice versa, girl that goes out with a guy, and they're dating for a while, and they go, sometimes I'd like you to meet my wife, husband. That happened to me one time. I met this in college, and I met this woman. She was also taking courses, and we kind of connected, right? And then she told me after a while, I took her out a couple times, and then she told me that she was married, and I'm like, what the hell? And she said, yeah, but my husband's okay with me dating guys on occasion. Keep the marriage spicy. And I was done. I was done with that. As soon as I found out, I got out of it. Come over and meet my husband. No, take care. The adolescent media have virtually no heroes who achieve their heroic status because of rational use of their mind or knowledge. Yeah. Social media and the invasion of technologies in nearly all aspects, there it is. Well, nearly all. I didn't say all. That's almost an absolute. That's like what, 80, 90% maybe? Of life has complicated the process of developing a mature person. Yes. Yes. It hinders growth, right? Interesting. Maybe you should read about that. How much time did you waste in adolescence or do you waste now on senseless gaming? What did I just say? What did I just say? Senseless social media, apps, gaming, emails, all that stuff, right? Which frequently entails violence. True. What's the one? That thief, auto thief. What the hell are they called? I don't know what the heck it is, but that game where you're driving around, auto theft. Is that auto theft? And it's extremely violent. One of the perks or side perks of the game is you can just run over and kill anybody. I asked, what's the point of that? Well, it's just something you do in the game. How much time did you spend posting things like pictures of what you're eating? How many private matters have you made public via social media? None, because I don't post. I don't put family pictures on there. I don't even have my own picture. Sometimes I'm on a complete incognito, unless I need to be me. Right? Did this ever backfire? I'm sure it has. Probably people have been canceled. You hear about that often, right? People posting things, and now I got lost my job, or you get docked. People find out where you live and they start harassing you. That's why I avoid. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I think I got. What else do I got? I don't know. I think I've got X, but I rarely use that. And one other one, I can't remember what it was. What it is? Those, the Facebook and Instagram, I'm under pseudonyms. I don't have pictures of me. I don't have pictures of family. I'm on there basically to interact with people I know. That's it. Family and friends. And I say, well, this is me. Don't tell anybody. I don't want my stuff out there. I don't want anybody to know. There's no need for it, right? It kills me when people post, "Hey, I'm going to the Bahamas for the next 2 weeks." Basically, you just set yourself up to be robbed. How many irrational ideas did you take into your mind or affirm by reading social media pages at all? How many groups did you get involved with online that were not pursuing rational purposes or using reasonable thinking? I'm doing that. I'm starting to pull out from more and more groups. I thought it'd be cool to get into some of these groups at first, and then I realized that they really don't do anything. They're just time wasting, you know. Like one political or one group, one wasn't a political group. It was like some performer or some band, you know. Do you love me? Do you still love me? Do you love my music? How many people on here love this song that I did? It's just very kind of silly, very adolescent, infantile. But I'm pulling out a lot of that stuff. Right? All of us are shaped often by a lifetime, for a lifetime, by decisions, habits we form during these important years. That's true. As soon as possible, conscious intervention is needed. So allegedly, and you might want to look this up. I'm no child psychology expert, but allegedly by the age of 8, most of who we are has already been established. How about that? Jeez. I thought, gee, that's kind of early, isn't it? Most of the points we have made about decision making can also be made about problem solving. Problems are embedded in the fabric of our life, almost to the same extent that decisions are. Every domain or decision making is also a domain in which we have to solve problems. Every decision has an impact on our problem, either minimize them or contribute to them, and so forth. Right? Uh, how far? I think we'll stop it right here. Becoming. Well, next time we'll get together and we'll start with becoming an active problem solver. Isn't that the? Yeah. So we're. Yeah, that's good. That's the next. So we looked at decision making, and then we'll get to problem solving problems. All right. So that's it for now. I hope that was helpful. Any comments or criticism you got, please leave them in the comments. Subscribe, all that good stuff. Talk to you later. Take care.